Greys are the most commonly reported type of ET abductor. I have been interested in this subject for many years and have often come across the opinion that they are cruel beings who use humans for their own purposes, especially human women who serve as incubators. However, after reading dozens, if not hundreds, of such reports, I have come to the conclusion that they are very complex beings and it is not clear what their intentions are. A few months ago, I heard from a person in Canada about their experience in abduction by Greys. This account provides a staggering amount of detail and I am sure it will add a lot of rich data to the discussion about the purpose of the Greys in being on Earth, which is also a common, if not the most common question asked about them. However, first I want to introduce the subject of Greys. I will now present a timeline that I have constructed of reports of encounters with Greys from the first half of the 20th century to 2023 and the appearance of the beings described. At the end of the timeline I will place the account I heard firsthand in the appropriate place. I invite you to watch. This timeline that I just presented, which also included the account of the man from Canada that I spoke to, shows the complexity of the accounts of the Greys and the differences in appearance between the different types of Greys. Later in the film, I will also discuss the behavior of the Greys in the different accounts. The theme of the hybridization program will also be a very important part of this film, so I want to give some background on this type of abduction as well. A time when the hybridization program began to be visible in the accounts is the abduction of Antonio Villas-Boas in 1957, and also the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, during which the Greys took a sperm sample from Barney Hill, which I will refer to later. But this topic was most popularized by the book, Intruders by Bud Hopkins, which I read. Now I would like to present an account of the abduction by Greys that I received from a person from Canada. I have long been interested in the topic of abductions by Greys and the creation of hybrids between Greys and humans. However, so far I have learned about it mainly secondhand. I read Bud Hopkins' book, The Intruders. It convinced me of the existence of Grey-human hybrids. However, I had not heard such first-hand testimony for many years, until now. I am honored to quote his words and analyze important details of his case. In some fragments, drawings of the witness himself and my own reconstructions will also be shown. I consider this an extremely interesting story and I will quote its contents in detail. Here's what the witness said.
I grew up on a family farm. In June 1966, I was 15 years old. I was walking across the field to bring back the cows that got out of the corral they were in. That's when I was abducted by Greys and brought aboard their spacecraft. The captain of that UFO asked me a lot of questions about myself and how I treated the farm animals. After my interview with him, I was taken to a medical lab and given a physical exam, including taking my sperm. After my exam, two children, a boy and a girl Gray, came into the holding room I was in and told me the captain was their father. They also told me their father was old, 800 years old, and they were each 70 years old. The girl told me that they were from the sun. They also told me their names, but all I remember is their names were Greek-sounding names like Maya and Jace. Another thing I noticed is that the Greys could talk to all the farm animals, even the trees, flowers, etc. Our farm dog Sparky told them that I treated him very well, the cow said I could treat them better, and the trees told the Greys that they were afraid. Of what, I wasn't told. This is just a summary of what I experienced. The concept art of what the Greys look like is not totally accurate. The Greys had smooth gray skin all over their body, their mouths were just a straight line. The mouth formed a V shape when they liked what you said, or went into an upside-down V shape when they did not like what you said. Their mouths always went back to a straight line appearance. They had no protruding nose. They communicated by thought. If they didn't like what you were saying, they would black you out. The Greys had total control of me. All I could do was move my eyes. The only reason I could walk was because they allowed me to. The son of the captain told me not to make his father angry when I tried to say goodbye as I was being escorted to the exit door. This told me that the Greys are quick to anger. Are they friendly? My answer would be that I think the Greys I was with were indifferent to us humans to a point. But the Greys did black me out when my pain got overwhelming due to their procedures in the lab. Procedures such as inserting a long thick needle into my belly button and inserting a long thick needle up my nose, etc. Would I like to encounter them again? The answer is no. Would like to tell you how I was taken aboard that UFO. While in the barn, I heard a high-pitched oscillating mechanical sound coming from a 10-foot x 10 feet shadow object that was hovering near the barn ceiling. I immediately thought of the cows and went to the corral that was behind the barn, only to see that somehow they got the gate open and ran across the field. As I was walking across the field, I thought I heard something behind me. I turned to look behind me and saw a UFO hovering just above the ground with two Greys with large black eyes with a V-shaped mouth looking at me from the UFO open door. The UFO was large, round, disc-shaped. I did not see the underneath because it was too low to the ground. The door was on the side of the UFO and it was rectangle-shaped. When the door was closed, you would never know it was there because it blended in with the rest of the UFO. I did not see how it opened or closed. The doorway was large enough for me to walk through without bending down. The middle edge of the UFO did not come to a point. The middle was flat all around the UFO at about 10 or 12 feet tall. From the inside of the UFO, the Greys had a cubicle where they sat in front of a monitor and were able to look outside through a window. The windows were not visible as you looked at them from the outside.
I would like to point out a similarity with other accounts. A soldier in the U.S. occupation forces in Salzburg, Austria, who was on his way home from work, claimed that in 1951 he was paralyzed with a strange pencil-shaped device by a being resembling a typical Grey, only with eyes that had many smaller eyes, like those of a fly. This is how the soldier described the being. He had no hair at all. I could see through the sort of glass helmet. His head was sort of a cylinder form. A very high forehead with big eyes. You could see lots of little eyes in the two big eyes. It seemed to me it looked like the eyes of a fly. No nose at all, just two holes. He had a very small slit for the mouth. It looked like he had skin. It was sort of white. There were two holes for the ears. His skull was very large. He had no eyebrows or any hair at all. The paralyzing device works in a similar way to another device used by the visitors during the Valençol incident in 1965, many years later. The soldier was transported inside a large object 150 feet in diameter. The room in the ship they were in had transparent walls, and the soldier could see stars while being inside the flying saucer. This reminds me of the description of the witness whose account is presented in this film, who describes that there was a window inside the ship through which he could see his house, but he could not see outside that window. According to the soldier's account, they later landed on a planet that reminded him of Mars, although according to today's knowledge it was probably a completely different planet. He saw other saucers there, one of which was probably gold and other people inside. When the Grey sent him back to his home, it turned out that only an hour had passed. The soldier commented on the creature's behavior toward him. My experience and seeing those other Earth people on that planet show me those people have a great knowledge of the people here and are much ahead of us. This creature treated me only as an animal. I will put a link to the full report from Salzburg in the description of the film. I now give the floor back to the witness.
Within seconds a force field grabbed me and proceeded to pull me towards the UFO door where the Greys were. I remember not being able to move or breath. I blacked out. When I woke up I was standing just inside the doorway of the UFO in front of a Grey. The Grey handed me a container filled with a clear liquid and told me to drink it. I didn't want to, but the Grey insisted I drink it, telling me that it will not harm me. I could tell the Grey was female and she was very gentle with me. After I drank the liquid I remember being in a daze. I could only move when they allowed me to. I noticed my shoes and socks were removed as I was being escorted to what turned out to be the captain. He was sitting at a small table in the hallway of the UFO in front of a cubicle that had a Grey sitting in front of a monitor. From where I was standing I could clearly see outside. That's when the captain sat in a chair across from him. One of the things he told me was that I was fortunate that it was him that I was speaking to. He told me there are others that are not so friendly. By him saying others, I took it as there are other aliens monitoring us. I must have mentioned God to him because he blacked me out, and when I came to, he told me that God was not a concern to them. You will not speak of God to us. That's when I became afraid of them. During my talk with the captain, a couple of things I remember him telling me was that my face was full of bugs as his mouth turned into an upside-down V. My reply to him was, bugs. Years later I learned that we humans have microscopic bugs on our face and hair. And the captain could see those bugs.
In fact, Demodex folliculorum is a species of small mite that lives on the human face and breeds in human hair. This demonstrates the Grey's great knowledge of us, humans, and the way we function, even down to the details.
Another thing I remember what the captain told me was that I was flawed. He just said you are flawed. I remember not feeling very good about what he told me and I wondered if he was going to harm me. But he didn't. So for years after I jokingly told people I was flawed when I made a mistake or misspoke. I have no idea what he meant by him saying I was flawed. The captain also told me that members of their own kind were killed by us humans. I was very surprised by that and I asked him why. I remember getting very angry about us stupid humans killing them. The captain did not answer me. Did the captain and I become pals as we spoke to each other? You might ask. The answer is no. In 1983 I underwent surgery on my nose sinus that was badly infected. During that operation they pulled out a smooth silver object from my nose sinus. The doctor showed me the object when I woke up and asked me if I knew how it got there. I shook my head no because I didn't want them to think I was a nut job. I asked for the object but the doctor refused to give it to me, telling me he was going to have that object investigated. So thinking back, when that long needle was inserted up my nose in the lab, the Greys must have left that object in my nose sinus. I remember hearing that high-pitched oscillating sound at least 5 times. The last time I heard that oscillating high-pitched sound was in a busy sports bar. I looked around nervously in hopes no one was paying attention to that sound, and nobody was. This was about 6 months before my sinus operation. I have not heard that sound after that object was removed. I think the Greys I encountered were doing scientific research on not only us humans but also on every living thing on this planet. The captain was very interested on how I treated our farm animals and what I thought of them. I told the captain that the farm animals, pigs, chickens, beef cows, etc., were my pets and that I loved them. The captain's mouth went straight across as he sat there and looked at me. He then asked me, "Why do you eat your pets?" referring to beef cattle, pigs. Without hesitation I told him my dad sends them to market. We don't eat them. He looked at me for a few seconds, then his mouth went into a V shape. Meaning he was happy with my answer. Another thing I realized at the time, that it was impossible to tell him a lie. It was like I was given truth serum. The Greys I encountered wore no clothes. The captain's son opened a flap, similar to the opening on the underwear we wear, to show me his genitals that looked real to me. But I cannot tell you for sure if it was their type of skin or if it was a manufactured one-piece covering. Would like to let you know that I was with the Greys for about 2 hours. So there is a lot of things that happened that I do not remember. Perhaps getting hypnotized would be the answer. But then again, maybe I'm better off not remembering the whole encounter.
You said the captain's genitals looked the same as a human's. I'm curious if you have information about whether Greys have 2 genders like us, or maybe they have more. I have information that says they have more genders, so I would like to know your observations.
Thank you for your question. Actually, it was the captain's son that showed me his genitals. I could sense that the captain was male, his children were male and female, and the Grey that was doing all the testing on me was female. The other Greys did not speak to me. I sensed they were the workers. One Grey worker that got close to me had eyes that looked mechanical to me that were behind the almond-shaped coverings. I assumed that the captain, his children, and the Grey that did the lab work were not mechanical. Would like to add that the captain's children were very playful, teased each other and acted like typical 8-year-olds. The son told me they were 70 years old, but I think the son was a bit older, and their father was old, 800 years old. In human years, so I'm guessing that the Greys lived to be 1,000 years old. To answer your question about genders, my opinion is that the Greys are either male or female. The captain did tell me that there are others that are not so friendly to us humans, so maybe it's the other aliens that have more than one gender.
If I understand correctly, you were part of the hybridization program because they took your sperm. In many cases, the sperm is then used to create human Grey hybrids, just like in the case of Barney and Betty Hill, which I mentioned when the Greys took a sperm sample from Barney, which was one of the first documented cases of its kind.
You are correct about the Greys creating human, Grey hybrids. It's something I did not want to talk about, but it's better that I do not hide anything. Yes, the Greys let me know sometime later that they created a hybrid for my sperm. I was surprised they did that because the captain told me I was flawed. What he meant by that I do not know. The Greys sent me a mental image of the hybrid they created, and it was upsetting to me how weak and sick it looked. In 1983, I had surgery on my nose sinus when the surgeon pulled out an oval-shaped metal object from my nose. The surgeon refused to give it to me. Contact with the Greys stopped after the metal object was removed.
I actually understand that you are concerned about the creation of hybrids. The Greys never seemed to ask for your opinion. What they said about God was also intriguing. Saying that God was not a concern to them and you will not speak of God to them means that they do not have a religion, or maybe they do?
It really angered the Greys when I mentioned God. I don't know what to think about the captain telling me not to speak of God and that God was not a concern to them. That response given to me could mean they acknowledge God exists, but they ignore that fact. It's a mystery to me what the captain meant. What I understood loud and clear was that I was risking harm if I made them angry. And I sure did by mentioning God concerning hybrids. I don't understand why I was shown what a hybrid looked like that was created from my sperm. It served no purpose showing me that. I often wonder if that hybrid is still alive. In my opinion, based on what I saw, I believe that poor being died.
Out of curiosity, I'll ask a question. How did you know that some of the Greys were female? Did they have any characteristics similar to human women, or did you just feel it? As for the hybrid, I think there's a good chance it survived. Hybrids look very weak at the beginning of their development, but this changes over time. I base this opinion on Peter Curie's experience.
Thank you for your opinion and question. Was taken aboard the spacecraft in June 1966. I was later shown the hybrid in October 1967. When you are up close to the Greys in person, you can tell if they are male or female. Guess you can say you feel it also. About the hybrid. Yes, the hybrid that was lying down appeared to be very weak, sickly, and near death. It looked to me that the hybrid did not have the strength to lift its head or keep its eyes open. I can't understand why they would show me the sorry state of health that hybrid was in. The Grey that was near the hybrids did not speak at all. Its mouth was a straight line, meaning that it was showing no emotion. It was like, here it is. I often think about that hybrid. It was obvious the Grey and hybrid were inside a spacecraft.
Have you touched any of the Greys? If so, how does it feel when you touch their skin? And approximately how tall were the captain's children?
No, they did not touch me, nor did I touch them. There was no need for them to do so. I was under their total control. I could not move unless they allowed me to. When on board that spacecraft, all I could do was move my eyes. When they wanted me to go into the exam room lab, they allowed me to walk on my own while under their total control. The captain always remained seated at a table in the passageway. The female lab worker was no more than 5 feet tall, and the captain's children no more than 4 to 41/2 feet tall. The worker Greys were also no more than 5 feet tall. All of them were not that tall, but they were not all that short either. I'm kind of surprised that you are not asking me what the hybrid looked like. I'm wondering if you already know. I really do not want to describe what that poor being looked like, but there is no sense in me hiding anything no matter how painful it is for me to do so. If you do not want to know what the hybrid looked like, that's okay by me. Your questions and comments are very good. Please feel free to ask me any questions or comments you might have. There is nothing that is out of bounds. The reason I'm doing this with you is because if you happen to come across another site that has not been on the site, that is describing pretty much what I have stated, then you know that site has credibility and worth pursuing. I'm also hoping that someone will come across the site and realize they have encountered the same thing and will reach out to me.
I expect that the hybrid at this stage of development simply looked like a newborn gray. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Did the grays you saw have eyelids under their lenses and blink?
I was shown the hybrid in October 1967. So it would be no more than 16 months old. The hybrid was small. Looked frail, sickly, and near death. The worker gray had thin round disc-shaped metal-looking eyes that were behind the almond-shaped black coverings. There were no eyelids, so there was no blinking. They were frightening to look at.
What did the eyes of the hybrid you saw look like? Did it have eyes that looked like Gray's eyes without the lenses, or were they more human?
The hybrid had human eyes, human nose, and human lips. The upper lip was a bit bigger than the bottom lip. The top of the head and hair is hard to describe. The color of the hybrid was gray.
How exactly did the control arm work? Does this mean that Gray was a cyborg?
Whoa! What a great question. I looked up what a cyborg is. That worker Gray could very well be a cyborg. I always thought it was a robot, but it looks like I'm wrong. The captain, his children, and the lab worker Gray are living beings, not cyborgs, is my understanding of them. But there is a slight chance I could be wrong. The eyes were connected to the metal control arm that allowed the eyes to move in any direction. It's the same principle that allows our eyes to move in any direction, except their eyes and control arm are made of some kind of metal-looking material. The control arm moved with the eyes.
So the Gray workers are lower in the hierarchy than the captain, his children, and the lab worker Gray? They only do tasks?
Yes, that's the way it looked to me. Thank you for helping solve a mystery I had about the worker Greys. It totally makes sense that they are cyborgs. The reason I believe that the captain and his children are living beings is because the son told me his father was old, 800 years old, and his sister was 70 years old, and I took it that he was a bit older than his sister, and that the son playfully showed me his genitals that looked real to me. Perhaps you have some insight on this. If you do, I would like you to tell me.
Interesting is what Dan Barish said on this matter. He said that the Gray he was working with, J-Rod, is over 600 years old, which would match what you say about the captain's age.
Could you please tell me who Dan Barish is? What Dan Barish told tells me that he has some credibility, and yes, the Greys have their own names. I would not dare to make up a name of my own to call them. But the name J-Rod I have concerns about. It's a red flag for me. They are not our friends. In my case, I was not allowed to call the children by their names after the son told me what their names were. Based on what the captain's son told me, I estimate the Greys' life to be 1,000 years old.
Dan Barish was a microbiologist who claimed to have worked with Majestic 12 at Area 51 in S4 and had contact with a Gray named J-Rod from the Kingman UFO crash in 1953. The name J-Rod was not his real name but one given to him by humans.
I watched 43 minutes of him talking about his interaction with J-Rod. I'm not impressed. When you learn the name of an alien or any human, you address that alien or human by that name. You don't insult them by giving them a nickname that has no meaning to them. I noticed he did not say the name of that alien. During his testimony he spoke a lot in vague terms, used long scientific-sounding gibberish. I noticed he would lower his voice at the end of his sentence, so you really didn't know what he was saying. Barish stated the alien was their captor, yet the alien was pleased and cooperative to answer any questions or do anything he wanted the alien to do. I seriously doubt that. I noticed Barish did not talk about what they fed that alien, or talk about why the alien was here or anything else that required details, him talking about the alien crying and all that is laughable. I only had contact with the Greys, but remember what the captain told me. There are others that are no so friendly. I'm positive that every different alien out there knows we humans are dangerous to come in contact with. That alien would not have exposed itself like that to be on this planet without backup or being weak and defenseless. What I believe actually happened is that he saw something and someone told him it was an alien. I can go on, but I will stop here. That Dan guy is not credible. The whole thing is a joke to him.
In fact, Dan Barish is not very credible. He also said things that are contrary to what I believe to be true. You said something about taking a DNA sample before?
I will describe to you what the instrument looked like that took my DNA. It looked like a clarinet without the flared end. It had keys on the top of it similar to what a clarinet has. At the end of the clarinet-looking device a hollow tube was attached to it. The hollow tube was connected to the wall of the examine room I was in. Once my private part was inserted inside its opening, the keys started moving up and down, rapidly creating a loud noise. After a few moments I could see the bulge of my DNA moving along the inside of that tube and disappear into the wall.
Over the years, many false myths have actually developed about the Greys. For example, that Greys have no emotions, or that all Greys are asexual, or that they are angels or demons. It is actually important that you clarify such misconceptions. I myself only saw a UFO 5 years ago, and my grandfather had contact with a strange green glow in missing time. The question I asked recently was whether the Grey working in the laboratory or the Grey worker made some deeper contact with you and, for example, they passed something on to you, or did you have any interactions with them?
The lab Grey did not speak to me. That Grey was strictly business. She had procedures to do on me, and that is what she did. The lab Grey was the one that met me at the door and insisted I drink the clear liquid from a container she held in her hand. She spoke to me by telepathy in a soft voice and mannerisms that were female. The lab Grey was gentle with me and would black me out when a procedure such as inserting a large needle into my belly button got too painful. The needle was attached to the end of a mechanical arm that may have been operated by remote control or was programmed. I'm sure she did much more to me, but she did so when I was blacked out. When she was done, she had me sit in a holding room next to the lab where I encountered the captain's children. This is all I remember about the lab Grey. She was kind and gentle with me. The worker Grey, as I call them, totally ignored me. The only reason I was able to see its actual eyes behind their almond-shaped black coverings was that it got very close to me as it slowly walked past me. The only interaction I had with the worker Greys was when I mentioned God. About 6 or so worker Greys appeared out of nowhere and were walking back and forth amongst themselves, reminded me of ants, while the captain sternly told me, "You will not to speak of God, God is not a concern to us," before blacking me out. I believe that the Greys were doing scientific research on the health and status of every living thing on this planet, and the planet itself. The Greys appeared to be indifferent to us humans and more concerned on how we treat every living thing we humans have control over. I would not say that they are our friends.
I would now like to comment on what the captain said about God. In Taken, Inside the Alien Human Abduction Agenda by Carla Turner, there is a case of a woman who was abducted as a child after seeing a Grey hovering outside her window. Unlike the captain described in today's film, whose demeanor was more serious and focused on his role, these Greys were full of love and affection toward the abductee. Additionally, when asked if they knew Jesus, they responded telepathically with a resounding yes, sending the witness into a state of loving ecstasy. There is no doubt that these beings were also Greys. This contrast highlights how different groups of Greys can have distinct attitudes and beliefs. The Greys in this film appear professional, carrying out their duties with a sense of structure, while the captain could become irritated and say that God was not a concern to them. In contrast, the Greys in the second case were kind and emotionally expressive, openly acknowledging a connection to God. These two cases illustrate significant differences in disposition among Greys. What I want to emphasize is that we cannot generalize the intentions and behavior of the Greys as a single race. Instead, each individual experience should be examined separately. Just as humans hold different beliefs and temperaments, so too might the Greys. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier in my discussion with the witness, one of the false myths about the Greys is that they are inherently emotionless. The case presented in this film contradicts this, demonstrating how quickly Greys can exhibit emotions, such as anger, depending on the situation. I now return to my discussion with the witness. Did the Greys you saw have fingers with nails, or did they not? I have heard different descriptions from witnesses on this subject. I would like to see if you can confirm or deny this.
When the lab Grey held a container of clear liquid in her hand, I saw no fingernails. I saw no fingernails on the captain, the worker Greys, or the children. The answer is no, they did not have fingernails. About nicknames. The Greys have names, only the captain's children told me their names. But I was not allowed to speak their names. So why on earth would I or anyone else insult them by giving them nicknames that have no meaning to them? Why would they allow us to insult them like that? The answer is no, they will not. The captain was quick to anger, and I'm sure if I came up with a nickname for him like he was some sort of pet, I hate to think what he would have done to me. People claiming to speak to a Grey using a nickname they made up to address them is an outright lie. This shows how arrogant we humans are. Please don't be suckered into this myth about the Greys liking to be called a made-up name by us humans.
As for nicknames, the name Skinny Bob was coined for one of the Greys seen in the popular, in my opinion probably real, videotape. But it may actually be disrespectful towards them, and it's best not to do it.
I did not see that video about the Grey being called Skinny Bob. So it's best that I do not comment on it, except to say that it breaks my heart to see all the disinformation being spewed out there. I can only imagine what the captain would have done to me if I called him or any other Grey Skinny Bob. If I saw the video, I would know right away if it is legit or not. So far, none of the videos I have seen were legit.
Here is the tape of Skinny Bob.
Thank you for showing me the video. That, whatever it was, does not look like the Greys I had an encounter with. Far from it. I went on YouTube site that talked about Skinny Bob. I have red flags about Skinny Bob. If Skinny Bob was so friendly and be willing to pose in front of recording cameras, how come no one knows Skinny Bob's actual name? Where it come from? Why was it here on this planet? UFOs have been seen flying together in packs. I doubt that UFO would be flying by itself without backup. The crew would not be all that weak and defenseless. The Greys I encountered were able to control my every move, so I don't see why Skinny Bob would not have the same powers. The crashed UFO photos showed that it was largely intact, so how could the occupants be flung out of that spacecraft? No physical evidence, no witnesses except for fuzzy out of focus vague recordings. Another scam is my conclusion.
Regarding the Greys you saw, did they have long arms and long, spindly fingers? This is how they are often described. Do you agree with this? And after meeting them, were your abduction memories clouded by them, or did you remember everything clearly right after returning home?
The Greys' arms were not excessively long, nor were their fingers spindly. The arms and fingers did not stand out as unusual to me. I was with the Greys for about 2 hours. I only remember maybe 40% of my encounter with them. I was blacked out a lot. What I do remember was that my belly button was really painfully sore for about 3 weeks after. That horrible pain kept reminding me that the encounter was real and kept me being reminded of what took place. Perhaps getting hypnotized would help me, but I doubt anyone would want to do that when it comes to trying to recall my encounter with aliens from another star system.
I have a question about the disc-shaped object you were taken on board. Was it more shaped like a flying saucer with a dome sticking out on top, or was it more flattened? Regarding the procedures you were subjected to in the lab, were you subjected to any other tests apart from inserting a needle into your nose and navel? And after completing the research, did the captain bring up anything else during his conversation with you? What's also interesting is that the captain told you that humans killed members of his species. I think this may, to some extent, confirm UFO crashes, e.g. the famous Roswell. In such incidents, the military often shot at the Greys out of panic. I will now quote the words of Colonel Philippe Corso, who wrote one of the most famous books on this subject, The Day After Roswell. It describes one such situation that the captain had in mind. This fragment of the book tells the experiences of Steve Arnold, who was one of the first to arrive at the crash site. "Hey, this one's alive," Arnold heard, and turned around to see one of the little figures struggling on the ground. With the rest of the medics, he ran over to it and watched as it shuddered and made a crying sound that echoed not in the air but in his brain. He heard nothing through his ears, but felt an overwhelming sense of sadness as the little figure convulsed on the ground, its oversized egg-shaped skull flipping from side to side as if it was trying to gasp for something to breathe. That's when he heard the sentry shout, "Hey, you," and turned back to the shallow rise opposite the arroyo. "Halt!" The sentry screamed at the small figure that had gotten up and was trying desperately to climb over the hill. "Halt!" The sentry yelled again and brought his M1 to bear. Other soldiers ran toward the hill as the figure slipped in the sand, started to slide down, caught his footing, and climbed again. The sound of soldiers locking and loading rounds in their chambers carried loud across the desert through the pre-dawn darkness. "No!" one of the officers shouted. Arnold couldn't see which one, but it was too late. There was a rolling volley of shots from the nervous soldiers, and as the small figure tried to stand, he was flung over like a rag doll and then down the hill by the rounds that tore into him. He lay motionless on the sand as the first 3 soldiers to reach him stood over the body, chambered new rounds, and pointed their weapons at his chest. "Fuck," the officer spit again. "Arnold." Steve Arnold snapped to attention. "You and your men get out there and stop those civilians from crossing this perimeter." He motioned to the small convoy of emergency vehicles approaching them from the east. He knew they had to be police or country sheriff. This is a typical example where humans, who are aggressive creatures, killed one of the Greys out of fear. I think the captain was talking about this type of situation.
Yes, I was really surprised when the captain told me that our kind killed one of their own. I blurted out to him, "Why?" "Oh no, why? The captain then blacked me out. I remember being very angry that we humans are so crazy. It affected me for a long time. I think there is something about Roswell that actually happened.
Regarding the hybrid you were shown in the vision, did it have human ears or not? And the vision in which it was shown to you suddenly appeared in your head?
As I was about to wake up in the morning after a good night's sleep, a telepathic vision appeared to me in a similar way we dream. I saw a Grey standing by himself at the top of metal-looking stairs with a V-shaped mouth. A V-shaped mouth means he was smiling. The Grey told me telepathically that he wanted to show me something that should please me, or something to that effect. The next thing I saw was a small-looking child, hybrid, that was laying down on what appeared to be a bed. I could only see the hybrid child from the chest up. The hybrid child looked very weak and sickly looking. It looked like it was grimacing in pain and was about to die.
The hybrid had human-looking eyes, nose, mouth, and ears.
The sides of the head had markings that went from the top of its ears to almost to the top of its head. The hybrid was light gray in color. I knew right away the hybrid child was created with the help of my DNA. I remember being overwhelmed with sadness and some anger as to why I was shown that poor creature. It did me more harm than good. They only showed me the hybrid once in October 1967.
I also have another question about the tests performed on you in the laboratory. Could you see the needle that was inserted into your nose? If so, could you describe what exactly it looked like as far as you remember?
Yes, I could see the needle because it was right in front of me. The needle was attached to the end of a long black metal-looking arm just like a dentist has. The long arm could bend in the middle and the needle could swivel in any direction to adjust its position to enter my nose or belly button. It looked like it was operated by remote control. That's all I could see because I could not move and I was blacked out a lot because of the severe pain as the needle was being inserted into me. I was in a sitting position on that examining table. No different than what our hospitals have to operate on you. My belly button was causing me severe pain for at least 3 weeks after. The pain was unbearable at times, but I was in a no-win situation. Even though I was 15 years old, I knew I could not tell a doctor or nurse the pain was caused by a gray alien with big black eyes sticking a huge needle into me while I was sitting naked that was from another star system. I had to tough it out on my own. I often thought, why me? I still do. Would like to tell you about a grade 12 student that went to my school told me and others that he and his family stopped at a campground to spend a couple of days there. As they were setting up their tent, a fair-sized UFO slowly rose up into the sky with no sound from behind the trees. The UFO had large windows and he could see beings inside it. He said what caught his attention was that there was a being that exactly looked like the King of Hearts on a playing card. He said that king-looking being was looking at him with sadness and pity in his eyes. His lips were moving like he was saying, "You poor thing." The UFO continued to rise slowly, then flew off in a flash. He told me and other schoolmates this in September 1966, 3 months after my encounter. He said they left the campsite in a big hurry, leaving all their camping gear and supplies at the campsite. I noticed his voice was shaky and he was trembling as he was talking about it. Guess it will be another mystery to ponder. 1966-67 was a time of UFO sightings.
I think the case of that student can be classified as so-called high strangeness, when stories involving UFOs and extraterrestrials deviate from the most commonly reported scenarios and include truly strange elements, such as creatures from folklore that do not fit typical abduction scenarios, or e.g. an alien resembling the King of Hearts. The distortion theory also states that some extraterrestrials, based on information found in our minds, can take on unusual forms.
I thought I would tell you about the strangest encounter with UFO beings that I ever heard. Best of all, I heard from the guy who experienced it.
The image you see on the screen now is a recreation of the hybrid that the witness saw. I tried to recreate the hybrid as accurately as possible. This is what the witness commented on after seeing the image.
I saw the hybrid laying on its side. I had a clear view of seeing the indents on the sides of its head just above and behind its eyes, over its ears. The indents on this picture is just like what I saw. The hybrid I was looking at back then was much smaller in size. The ears, nose, mouth, except upper lip was a bit bigger, looks the same. The only thing that is not right about this picture is that this hybrid needs to be gray in color. Yes, this picture is accurate to the hybrid I observed in October 1967. I could not believe my eyes when you sent this to me. I do hope the sickly hybrid I saw in October 1967 is now living a healthy life that I will assume he is. I'm pleased to say I'm glad to have that mystery solved. This picture has helped me more than you will ever know. I can now put my mental anguish over this whole experience to rest. There is no longer any need for me to search for answers. This picture answered them all.
I am very glad and honored that this illustration I sent to the abductee helped to end his suffering over this hybrid. I also hope that he is now living a peaceful life, probably on a gray ship.
I made the rough drawings of where I was inside the spacecraft while encountering the Greys in 1986, 20 years after my encounter with them in 1966. It was in 1986 that I was first thinking about reaching out to others who had similar encounter like I did. You can use part of my account to show the drawings. It was my hope from the beginning that someone would realize that the same thing happened to them after reading about my encounter with the Greys and get in touch with me or someone like you so we could share our experiences so we all could get a better understanding and insight into what the Greys are all about and why they are here. I'm so glad that I mentioned that sickly-looking hybrid, because it was not something I planned on doing.
I also have one more question for you about the Grey sitting in front of the monitor that you drew. If I understand correctly, you couldn't see him being operated on at that moment, but later you saw the inside of your house and the ghost. If I've misunderstood this part of your account, please correct me.
About the Greys sitting in front of the monitor inside the cubicle. Because the Grey's body was blocking my view, I could not see what device the Grey inside the cubicle was using that allowed the images of inside our farmhouse and the spirits of the two little girls to be on the monitor in front of that Grey. The drawing I made was only a guess that a keyboard was being used. The monitor looked like a laptop screen that we use today. The next day I went into the bedroom and talked to the two little girl spirits. Even though I could not see them, but somehow I knew they were there. I told them that I knew they were there and not be afraid. I also told them that it was okay to go look for their mother elsewhere because she was not here. I have no explanation on how I knew they were looking for their mother. Myself nor anyone else did not see or hear anything unusual anywhere inside our house. The only time I saw the two spirits were on the Grey's monitor. I hope they found peace. The reason for me talking to the two little girl spirits was that many of our farm animals, trees, etc., stated to the Greys that they were afraid. So I spoke to the two spirits and asked them not to be afraid and not be afraid to look for their mother.
Out of curiosity, I wanted to ask if between your abduction and today you managed to successfully contact another victim of the abduction by the Greys?
No, I have not been in contact with another person that experienced abduction by the Greys. Since 1986, it has been my desire to get in contact with someone that experienced abduction by the Greys. Like I did so we could get a better understanding of what the Greys are all about. There must be a lot of people that got abducted by the Greys and experienced what I did. I totally understand why these people are hesitant to make themselves known.
I have a question about the captain. If the Grey workers only had coverings over their real, smaller eyes, did the captain also only have lenses over his real eyes, or maybe in the case of him and his children, these were their real eyes? And when the Greys' mouths turned into a V, did you notice the lips on their mouths, or were they just lines? And most importantly, did the captain and his children ask you any more questions during their interview with you? As for Roswell, the Grey survivor of this crash may have been captured by the humans and held at Wright Field because he may have been a worker Grey who may not have had the same abilities as the Greys higher up in the hierarchy.
I was not able to see what was behind the captain's, the children's, or the lab workers' almond-shaped black coverings because they did not get that close to me like the worker Grey did. I assume the almond-shaped black coverings itself is not the captain's, his children or lab worker eyes but have biological normal-looking eyes behind those almond-shaped black coverings. Will remain a mystery for now. In summary, my guess is that the black almond shape could be their actual eyes or have normal biological eyes behind the almond-shaped black coverings. We know what is behind the worker Grey's almond-shaped black coverings. All the Greys had a thin slit for a mouth. No lips, had two slits for a nose. When they made a V shape with their slit, it meant they were happy. When they made a upside-down V shape with their slit, it meant they were not happy. When they were showing no emotion, the slit always remained a straight line. I do not remember most of the questions the captain asked me. Fortunately, I remember some of the interview that mattered. You asking specific questions has helped me trigger a memory so I could respond to you as accurately as possible. Would like to say all the Greys looked exactly alike, the same height and the same mannerisms. It looked like they all had specific jobs to do. I remember thinking at the time that they were behaving like ants.
This comparison reminds me of Whitley Strieber's hypothesis, which he described in his book Communion, based on his own experiences, that the Greys have a group mind, much like ants in a swarm. The comparison of the abducted Grey workers to ants gave me this idea.
I saw fingers on the lab Grey when she was handing me the container with clear liquid inside with her hand and wanted me to drink it. How many fingers? I think I saw 4. I'm sure there was not 3, the fingers did not appear to be extra long. The only reason I could see them from the waist up is when they were walking away from me. I could only do this because I could not move my head, forcing me to look at their face only. The captain remained seated at his desk in the passageway. He never moved.
In the context of assessing the veracity of some Grey encounters, could you please assess whether this photo of the Grey female is real or fake? Whitley Strieber says it's true. I wonder if this photo matches the Greys you saw.
I could tell right away that this photo does not match the Greys I encountered. The creature in this photo. The arms are a bit too long, the legs starting in the hip area are too far apart. Is not all Grey in color. Almond-shaped black eye coverings not slanted upwards. Unfortunately, the face is too blurred to make out what the mouth and nose look like. Too bad this photo is out of focus. To compare this photo to the greys I encountered, this photo is fake unfortunately. I'm keeping an open mind on whether or not this could be another extraterrestrial species that resembles the greys.
I have heard many credible accounts of the greys over the years, including yours, but the descriptions of the greys in these cases are often contradictory. The differences are usually in the following: greys having wrinkles, greys size, greys number of fingers, greys head shape, greys having noses and ears. Sometimes greys have small noses, and in the case of Travis Walton, small ears were also visible. Grey skin structure, greys mouths, grey skin color, greys asexuality, etc. So I think that the explanation for these various variations in the description of the greys in credible cases indicate that they have many forms that are distinct from each other. Skin color is also easily explainable in my opinion, because greys, just like humans, can simply have different skin colors.
Yes, there are many different descriptions of greys. All I can do is to continue to offer my opinion on submitted drawings of greys based on the greys I had the encounter with. Sharing my encounter with a wider group of people is something I've wanted to do for many years but did not have any idea how to do that. By doing this, it is my hope that someone will come forward that had the same experience I did. This way we can compare notes to get a better understanding of the greys we encountered. I really appreciate everything you are doing in efforts to expose the truth about extraterrestrials.
The video you all are currently watching was created at the request of the abductee so that he could share his experience with a wider group of people. Anyone who has had a similar experience, please send it to my Gmail, which is provided in the description of the video and channel. While analyzing your account, as well as those of other people who had very similar experiences, I noticed a striking similarity in one specific detail you described during your abduction. This detail relates to the description of the door on the flying saucer. In my opinion, your description closely aligns with the account of Antonio Villas-Boas from 1957, which you may have heard of. Just in case, I will briefly summarize his story. On October 15, 1957, while plowing the field with his tractor, Antonio Villas-Boas noticed a red light in the sky that kept getting closer. Eventually, he realized it was a vehicle shaped like an elongated egg. This frightened him, and he considered escaping. However, fleeing in the tractor would have been much slower than the spaceship, and running on foot through loose soil carried the risk of injury. The craft eventually landed on 3 supports. Antonio left the tractor and tried to run, but someone grabbed his arm. He managed to push the figure away, but 3 other beings quickly caught up with him. They were dressed in gray overalls that covered almost their entire bodies. Judging by the shape of their helmets, their heads appeared elongated and about twice the size of a human's. They had light blue eyes, seemingly smaller than a human's, though this could have been an illusion caused by the lenses over their eyes. Antonio resisted as much as he could, struggling against his captors, but ultimately, he was overpowered. The beings lifted him, preventing him from defending himself, and carried him, albeit with some difficulty, onto the ship. Once inside, he was subjected to some tests, including having blood drawn from both sides of his chin. Eventually, a naked woman, whom I believe was a human/gray hybrid, entered through the door. She had light hair and white skin. While she possessed many human features, some gray characteristics were also evident. For example, her large, slanted eyes, which were slightly bigger than a human's. Many illustrations depict her with an enlarged skull, similar to that of a gray. Antonio ultimately impregnated her, though possibly not of his own free will. The beings had previously rubbed a liquid on his body, which might have artificially induced lust. The hybrid then pointed at her stomach, then at him, and finally at the sky, seemingly indicating the significance of what had happened. Afterward, the beings signaled Antonio to get dressed, then gave him a tour of the ship before eventually releasing him. Following the incident, he exhibited physical evidence of the encounter. His chin developed irritated marks on both sides, leaving 2 circular scars. Now, returning to the similarity with your case. This is how you describe the UFO door. The door was on the side of the UFO, and it was rectangular. When the door was closed, you would never know it was there because it blended in with the rest of the UFO. This is how Antonio Villas-Boas described the door. At the same time, the front door closed and rose upwards. They fit so tightly that when they closed, you couldn't see where they were, even though it was as bright as day inside. They looked as if they were fused with the wall into one whole. I believe your description and Antonio Villa's boas are nearly identical, aside from the fact that you did not witness the door opening or closing and the exact shape. As for the Antonio Villa's boas case itself, I believe that hybrids, already a mix of greys and humans, may continue to interbreed with humans, making later generations increasingly indistinguishable from us while still retaining gray genetic traits. It is possible that such hybrids already coexist with us, and we may not even be aware of it. I also have my own theory about this case that ties in with what you told me. However, it might seem a bit far-fetched. Let me know if you'd like to hear it.
Yes, I would like to know what your theory is about my and Mr. Boa's encounter. I'm a bit surprised that Mr. Boas stated that he had direct sexual encounter with that female being. That's all I'm going to say about that because my encounter was with the Greys. The Greys used mechanical means to get my sperm, as I previously stated. In fact, the Greys never physically touched me that I'm aware of because the captain blacked me out a lot. What haunts me to this day is what the captain told me after I mentioned God. When I mentioned God, the captain immediately blacked me out. When I woke up, the captain told me, "You will not speak of God to us. God is not our concern." Plus the fact that the Greys can communicate with every living thing on this earth. That includes plants, trees, animals, insects, etc. Thank you for all you are doing to help make sense of what is going on with these beings.
I'll share my theory with you. It concerns the beings in gray suits who forcibly took Mr. Boas aboard the UFO. I often hear that they were simply masked aliens, but I don't entirely agree with that. It's worth paying attention to their described appearance. They had elongated heads, about twice the size of a human's. This is a typical gray feature. However, from what I know, Greys generally have heads that are more elongated horizontally, making their skulls appear wider. Meanwhile, the hybrid you described had a head that was elongated vertically, with a high, dome-shaped forehead. I base this observation on the illustration of the hybrid that you confirmed as accurate. This is an important distinction between typical Greys and this specific hybrid. Their light blue eyes, on the other hand, look nearly identical to human eyes. They appeared slightly smaller than typical human eyes, but this could have been an illusion caused by the lenses. This matches the hybrid you told me about, as it also had human-like eyes, despite the fact that you described them while they were closed, which is a key difference from typical Greys. I noticed that this description somewhat overlaps with the hybrid you described to me. The suited beings that Mr. Boas encountered, like your hybrid, had larger than human heads and human-like eyes. I also get the impression that the type of elongation is similar in both cases. So, I think these beings could have been male hybrids. Let me know what you think. I'm happy to share this theory with you.
I looked up Mr. Boas and listened to the narrative about his encounter with a certain type of aliens. My response to that is I recall the captain telling me, "You are fortunate that you are with us. There are others that are not so friendly." So in my opinion, Mr. Boas could have had direct contact with another species of aliens that the captain talked about to me in general terms. I find him credible.
To summarize in the context of other alien races, there are many accounts of hostile extraterrestrials, as well as cosmic brothers who wish to help us on our path to spiritual development. For example, the Nordics, including the Pleiadians, or the Arcturians and Andromedans are often perceived as positive. They are often described as beings who wish to help us in our spiritual development and to reach a higher level. Michel Desmarquet described the intentions of the alleged hermaphroditic visitors from the planet Jehovah in the same way, although I have great doubts about the credibility of his particular account. On the other hand, the reptilians, greys, and sometimes praying mantises are often considered to be these evil types of extraterrestrials. In my opinion, no race of extraterrestrial being can be described as unequivocally evil or good. Just like us humans, many of these races, although at a higher level of development, can still have differences of opinion and intentions between individuals and social groups, which leads me to conclude that whether we are dealing with an evil or positive extraterrestrial being often depends on individual experience, and you can't lump everything together. I do agree with the witness, however, that there are certainly extraterrestrial beings who have less peaceful intentions than the Greys he dealt with. I will now return to my discussion with the abductee. I have another question, a bit personal, that the public may be asking. How do people in your immediate circle and your family perceive your experience?
In 1986, 20 years after my abduction, I told my wife and kids about my abduction along with the drawings I made. They listened politely. In the years since, I did mention it a few times again. My brother witnessed my abduction from a distance, but we seldom talked about it. After the Greys let me go, I returned to the corral with the steers. My 14-year-old brother ran up to me thinking I was abducted by Jesus. He was all excited, jumping up and down with his finger pointing to the sky, yelling, "It's him! It's him! It's what's his name? You were with Jesus." Every once in a while I chuckle about that. As far as friends, family members, co-workers go, I spoke in general terms that the Greys are real occasionally. What I didn't do often since my abduction was to tell people to be kind to all animals, including pets, birds, plant life, flowers, trees, to one another. I tried to talk people out of hunting for animals, go fishing, etc. In other words, don't kill anything for sport. Instead of giving my wife cut flowers, I give her potted plants. I hate to pull weeds from the lawn, because I know they want to live. I get very angry when I witness cruelty to not only animals but to fellow human beings. I lost many friendships when I called them out for not being kind. About 5 months ago, a neighbor out of the blue started talking to me about aliens he read about online. I listened to him politely until he started talking about the Greys. What he had to say about the Greys were so outrageous that I started to tell him about my abduction. I didn't finish because he left in a hurry, and I have not seen him since.
The fact that someone else witnessed part of your abduction is very important. I am also curious about what your neighbor said that was so outrageous about the Greys.
My neighbor was talking so stupid I don't want to repeat his garbage. He was talking nonsense about the Greys making human women sex slaves, etc.
This is another example of the false myth about the Greys. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with me. My knowledge of the Greys has expanded greatly because of it. If you were to say a message at the end, what would it be?
My message to everyone of what I learned from my encounter with the Greys. Kindness matters.
Thank you so much. As you have just seen, this incredible and highly complex account perfectly illustrates that the intentions of the Greys and their nature are far from simple. As I mentioned earlier, you cannot generalize or fit everything into one category, and this case is a perfect example of that, highlighting the complexity of the entire abduction phenomenon. I'd now like to repeat my earlier appeal. If anyone watching this documentary has had a similar experience to the abductee I spoke with, please share your story in the comments below or send it to my Gmail, which is listed in the channel description. Thank you for watching this documentary, and see you soon.